We'd very much like to thank tonight's sponsors, Blue Apron, Mack Weldon, and the Great Courses Plus.
Please remember, supporting our sponsors supports us, and thanks to that, some exciting things are pending for the future of Astonishing Legends, and more importantly, you guys, our listeners.
I'm getting a corner office, right?
No, not so much.
Okay. Well, I'd settle for it. You'd cut a hole in this foam fort here so I can see out.
Yeah.
That'd be nice.
Blanket Fortiana is very encroaching.
Claustrophobic?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, it's time for Astonishing Legends to change directions a little bit.
We've been down some crazy roads that border on true crime lately.
Well, we enjoy covering that stuff, sure, but there's a whole lot more we like to talk about.
36 episodes, and we've never done a UFO story, really.
Well, I mean, Lake Baikal.
Yeah, that's true.
That was a big element of
the
I think it saved. It's probably saved the episode. No, it was all interesting, but you're right. It wasn't the main focus.
Exactly. So it's time for us to take a good look at a good, fun UFO story.
There are thousands upon thousands of them, but only a small percentage warrant extra attention, and tonight's show is one of those cases.
Welcome back to Astonishing Legends. I'm Scott Philbrook, and this is Forrest Burgess.
Ronald Johnson doesn't know what it was, but it rumbled, whistled like a jet or the high whine of tires on the freeway, and shot into the sky and left a glowing ring behind on the ground. Page 2 of the Salina Journal, Friday, November 5th, 1971.
Join us tonight for part 1 of a 2-part series on a paradoxically infamous but also obscure close encounter of the second kind from 1971. On November 15th of 1971, Elvis Presley played an hour and 10-minute set in Kansas City. He was in rare form that night, making fun of himself, according to fan Peggy Elzia's article in Kieran Davis's book, Elvis on Tour, 1971. There's a whole book, yes, just about that 1 year of touring. No, wait, I want it.
Okay,
I've read excerpts online.
Yeah, that's not the book that the guy swam with at Oak Island.
No,
that was Elvis and Me.
Was Elvis
that
and
was
Me.
Elvis and Me,
yeah,
but it was by
when he had the nervous breakdown and
he
island.
Saw something very, very scary that caused him to swim to the mainland. Yes. Anyway, if you listen to that episode, you'll get it all. But yeah, not that book, right?
Well, according to this fan Peggy, who was there, she said that night, November 15th, 71, on stage, Elvis said, "I was a weird little kid, man. I had sideburns. 2 years old, a little bitty guitar."
Okay, yeah, now who's doing the impressions?
That's the worst. Hey, you want to do it? I can't.
Look, I thought you were going to play a little piece of Love Me Tender right there.
Well,
but you
was. I made some calls. And turned out it was $750,000.
Well, you made a wise decision, my friend.
Elvis is, or was, the true king of rock and roll. Gone, but not forgotten.
Actually, I saw him at the Malibu Country Mart last week. Okay, so he's still alive.
Oh, right.
All right, very good.
Just 13 days prior to the Elvis concert, only 200 miles to the west, one of the most controversial trace evidence UFO encounters in history took root. Is it a coincidence? Maybe they were there to pick him up.
The Delphos ring.
This is what you call a trace evidence case. That means a UFO sighting where something tangible was left behind.
That's right, and it's something tangible and unexplainable as being terrestrial in origin, okay, meaning evidence of an alien nature. Now, when we say that, just means not of this Earth. They don't know. It doesn't seem like anything from this planet. Okay?
That's right. And that's where this case gets complicated. But before we get to that, let's talk about what happened.
The moon was full and could be seen in the southeastern sky. It was not cloudy, but it was around 7 p.m., well after sunset, which was about 5:30.
16-year-old Ronnie Johnson was doing his evening chores by tending to sheep on his family farm. He was about 250 feet from the back of the house, and his dog Snowball was with him.
As he was heading around to the back of the barn, he heard a rumbling sound that he compared to what might sound like an old washing machine. That kind of rumbling, thumping sound.
Right, and especially if it's like a little out of balance.
Yeah, you've heard that. You put a blanket on a big heavy blanket on one side, and it's going that.
Yeah, I love this description. This story is so analog.
Well, yeah, but if you've ever done laundry, you know exactly what he's talking about. Yeah, that kind of thumping sound. Anyway, a kind of a mechanical thumping, running motor sound.
Right, which is the first thing that's kind of anachronistic for a UFO sighting.
Well, a lot of them nowadays, yeah, because that's the other thing they say is they're completely silent.
Yeah.
Which freaks people out because here's this thing not making any noise. Anyway,
Right.
So that's what Ronnie was saying. And in addition to the rumbling, the object, which was about 75 feet away from Ronnie at the time and hovering just above the ground, it became illuminated with multicolored light. And he described the light as not being from bulbs, but emanating from all over the surface of the object, blue, red, and orange, and not changing, but staying constant. And on top of that, it was glowing at its base, and some sort of material seemed to be drifting down out of the bottom of it onto the ground.
Yes, I love that detail. It reminds me of the end of Starman, which I don't want to spoil. I think I've probably mentioned it on 20 prior episodes.
Well, no, we did one.
Okay.
Yes, we have we have mentioned it. Yeah.
But if you haven't seen it, kids, check it out. Jeff Bridges was actually Oscar nominated for his performance in that movie in 1985, I think. But he lost out to an equally amazing performance by F. Murray Abraham as Salieri in Amadeus.
Ah, yes. We've talked about that one actor who plays the kind scientist, Charles Martin Smith.
Yes.
Yes.
That's the guy E.T. needs to find if he wants to live.
Right. He's so recognizable. And Jeff Bridges was awesome because he develops this kind of like Jenny, and then I make maps.
Yeah.
It's just great. But the other thing I was going to say, UFO-wise anyway, is that it reminds me of another UFO incident closer to my homeland, the Maui Island incident, kind of south of Seattle. Now, I'm not from the Seattle area, but...
Forrest will never indicate exactly where he's from. He's from a vague region.
It's the Pacific...
The northwest corner of
let's say Pacific.
States.
We say Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
There was another case though where several craft ejected what looked like bits of metal. So that totally.
I've heard about this story. Didn't
they
find mercury on the water or something?
It's not mercury. Well, no,
Or-
it's a famous kind of a story. And what I love about it is that one, it ejected stuff, metallic chunks.
Stuff.
It's
a technical
they
term.
don't know what it is, but it looked like chunks of maybe molten aluminum or something metallic. And it ended up breaking the arm of the son of the captain of the boat that they were over. I don't know I'm sorry that makes any sense, but they were over a fishing boat in the area.
Right.
One of the craft seems like it's wobbling. It's having trouble flying. It then ejects out of its center. These are kind of like chunks of or bits of metal that were molten. You know what I'm saying? Like gold nuggets.
Yeah.
That's the picture that I'm getting.
Okay.
Well, one falls and kills the dog, the family dog.
Aw.
One breaks the arm of the son of the boat captain. So then, of course, the armed forces come out and want to collect this material. And what I love about this story is that there's two incidences to this phenomenon that's happening. One, it's the sighting of these craft and the ejection of the material. And I don't love the dog getting hurt, but or the son. But there's physical material. That's in a close encounter of the second kind. Trace material left behind.
Right.
Okay, and then the second aspect of this, the military comes out and they want to collect this material. And they get some. They gather this stuff up, whatever was left on the beach that they could find and on the boat. They confiscate it. The military transport plane on its way back down to an Air Force base crashes not long after it takes off.
Okay.
Big mystery.
Right.
Military then has to come out again, collect the plane debris, and figure out what happened. Was it a mechanical failure?
What did they do with the material?
No one knows.
It's like Super 8.
There you go. Okay, so anyway.
So
I will say this before we continue. It is one of those rare cases where there is physical trace evidence.
Yes.
If you believe this case.
Right.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, I want to take a quick moment to mention one of the sponsors of tonight's show, Blue Apron. These guys deliver delicious, ready-to-cook meals to your house, and that's perfect for me because I love to cook, but I'm challenged by the fact that I hate going to the grocery store, and on top of that, I can never think what to make.
Blue Apron takes care of all of that for you. Their website is a breeze to use, and more importantly, their culinary team has new recipes each week that are not repeated within a year.
Yeah, I love that too because I've tried some of their competitors before, and that's where you always wind up. You get tired of your choices. So it's great to know you're going to have something new to make every time you use them. And on top of that, you can customize your recipes weekly if you want.
It reminds me of a saying, I believe attributed to Mark Bittman, a great cook, and he said, when you start off with real food, you end up with real food. Okay, Blue Apron knows that when you cook with incredible ingredients, you make incredible meals. So they set the highest quality standards for their community of artisanal suppliers, family-run farms, fisheries, and ranchers. Whether it's Japanese ramen noodles, wild-caught Alaskan salmon, or heirloom tomatoes, Blue Apron brings you the best. For less than $10 per meal, Blue Apron delivers seasonal recipes along with pre-portioned ingredients to make delicious, home-cooked meals.
And every meal they send has step-by-step instructions and can be made in 40 minutes or less, which as a stay-at-home, cursory researching, podcasting dad, I got to say is awesome. It gives me more time for my family and more time for the show.
Check out this week's menu and get your 2 meals free with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/astonishing. You will love how good it feels and tastes to create incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron, so don't wait.
That's blueapron.com/astonishing.
Blue Apron, a better way to cook.
All right, so getting back to our story, Ronnie described the object as being roughly shaped like a mushroom, about 9 feet in diameter and 10 feet high. It was so bright that it was difficult for him to make out much more than that. Looking directly at it actually hurt his eyes. The sheep were freaking out as well, bellowing like crazy.
Ronnie was frozen with fear. He stood as still as he could, and he noticed that Snowball the dog, who was the object of our derision on Twitter last week, well, yours anyway, I would never criticize a dog, but he was dead silent as well and not moving.
More importantly, he wasn't protecting Ronnie by attacking the UFO in the freaking backyard. You had one job, Snowball. One job.
What's he going to do, jump 20 feet in the air to bite this thing?
I don't know. He's supposed to be his man's best friend.
Well, no, but it's like the laughing Indian. I find this fascinating because animals are so in tune and they see things that we don't. I'm convinced of that, of
yes,
course.
but someone already pointed out to me that in the laughing Indian, that dog didn't do anything either.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying, because is it just in Mark's head? What is he seeing? Is it benign? Does he know that it's not really a threat? There's so much going on that when the dog does not react, especially at this big glowing mushroom orb, what are they seeing?
How was staring at it.
And, well, no, how does how does the dog interpret that? It's different between a cat watching television and a dog, because they say that dogs don't really gronk what's going on the... I
think it's grok.
I say gronk, like Gronkowski, Rob Gronkowski. Never mind. Sorry. Okay. Continuing on. What I'm saying is that you don't know what's going on or how they interpret that. Right. It's like headlights coming down the road. Why is a jackrabbit or a deer? This is a good time to launch out in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
They're afraid, but they're leaping towards it. So anyway, it's an interesting aspect of this story, the animal aspect.
Well, and the other part about this was Ronnie is pretty sure he would have noticed it earlier had it either been lit up or making any noise. So in his mind, this thing may have been there for quite some time, just quietly sitting in the dark, which in a lot of ways is kind of terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. And was it making noise then? Did it just start making noise? There's a lot of things to this description that we don't know yet, but we're lucky to even have this description because it's a pretty close encounter, I will say.
All right, so how long did it hang out after he saw it?
Well, according to him, several minutes. Then the base of it lit up even more, and it began to rise into the sky pretty quickly, but not straight up, at more of an angle and passing within about 4 feet of a roof of a shed in its path. Ronnie said that when it got over the shed, the rumbling noise changed to more of a high-pitched sound similar to a jet engine.
Now, at this point, he completely lost his vision. According to the Flying Saucer Review's supplemental Case Histories publication in February of 1972, even though he couldn't see, he could still hear it flying away. His sight eventually returned, and he could still see it in the sky, so he ran to the house to tell his parents. His mom had called out to him earlier to come in for dinner, and he told her he was on his way before he saw this thing. But it took him so long to come in, she called for him again, and that time he didn't answer.
She did not, however, witness anything at this point.
No, and as the craft departed to the southeast, it passed the farmhouse on the west side. So now Ronnie is freaking out, yelling at his parents, who, like all parents, when they hear something like that...
Well, they thought he was crazy.
Right, yeah. But they did finally make their way outside, and they reported that they saw a strange light in the sky as bright as a car headlight. This is a 1971 car headlight, by the way. But a car headlight about 100 feet away. And they said that's not the distance to the light, but how bright the light it was.
Yeah.
They said it was about half the size of the full moon, which, as we said earlier, was clearly visible at the same time in the southeastern sky. So there could not be a confusion between this thing, this craft, and the moon being the same object.
Yeah, so they're both in the sky at the same time.
Exactly.
So you can't say, well, you just saw the moon.
Yeah.
Well, they all three reported that it was as bright as an arc welder, which if you ever walked by one, you shouldn't look directly at it. It's very bright.
I always look right at it.
Don't do that.
I know.
No, it'll burn a hole in your retina.
Yeah.
Okay, well, keep in mind, these folks aren't elderly here, okay? Darrell was only 52 and Irma was 49, and these are Ronnie's parents.
Now that the UFO is way up in the sky, they're curious about the area where it was hovering, and would there be evidence there?
They head around the shed to where Ronnie said he had seen it and saw something that blew their minds. A glowing white ring on the ground that was so bright, Irma, Ronnie's mom, said, you could have read a newspaper by it. And it wasn't the only thing glowing. The trees around the path of ascension were apparently glowing in various places as well. Now, both Irma and Darrell Johnson seemed to think it was a good idea to try and touch the ring, and no sooner had they done that than they both lost feeling in their fingers from where they touched it. And Mrs. Johnson even touched her leg with the same hand, and that became numb too.
The numbness was so severe, it stuck with Mrs. Johnson for several weeks. She actually worked at a senior living facility and apparently was unable to take pulses on any of the residents for a while because she couldn't feel anything in her fingers.
If it's a made-up story, again, that's a long way to carry a joke.
Yeah, it's a lot of details.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A lot of interesting details.
And Mr. Johnson said, however, that even though he felt the numbness, his hands recovered quicker. And I would posit that being a farmer and working his farm daily, his skin was probably tougher and more impervious to the deleterious side effects of whatever was in that white ring.
Oh, I agree. Yes, he's got working man's hands. And here's the last bit of information that's so wonderful. Mrs. Johnson had the foresight to photograph the ring while it was glowing. She ran into the house, grabbed a Polaroid camera, and brought it out to take what is now a famous photo of the ring just 10 minutes after they first discovered it. She stated that it was so bright it was easy to find in the viewfinder, and she also said that she did not use a flash. This fact will be important later. And I will say this, in UFO lore, I think it's one of the only photographs really that is that soon after an incident.
Yeah.
I mean, in a Polaroid, yes. Well, of course, now people have digital cameras and photos from things that happen while it's happening, but not of this kind of evidence. You know what I'm saying? There's a difference, and that's important.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay.
That's pretty much the end of the encounter, right?
Yes, but not the aftermath, which continues to this day.
Yeah.
Okay, so getting back to our story, which, as you told me years ago, before, not even to do a podcast on, you were just asking me if I knew about it. You said, have you heard of the Delphos ring, which is what it's commonly referred as?
Yeah, and I only just found this out last week from the ARC, actually, but I guess the locals actually pronounce it Delphos.
The Delphos ring. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's spelled Delphos with an O, but if you don't take regional accents into account, but in Greek mythology, it is also spelled with a U as Delphos.
Okay, well, so which is it?
I don't know, but Delphos was the son of Apollo in one tradition, and the son of Poseidon and Melantho in others. Melantho being a servant in Odysseus' household that was tricked by Poseidon as he appeared to her in the form of a dolphin.
He's always doing that, isn't he?
Yeah, that's what I used to do in college to get the girls.
Yeah, appearing as an animal. Yeah. I think a cute puppy would work best.
Yeah.
It's a truncation of a name. It's like in sailing. Gun whale. It's not gun whale, it's gunnel.
Gunnel, yes.
Forecastle is not forecastle, it's forksel.
Yeah.
There you go.
So,
okay.
Well, all right. Anyway, it probably isn't relevant to tonight's story beyond this point, except for the interesting idea that Delphi in ancient Greece was named for Delphos, as in the oracle at Delphi.
Yes, right.
And it was actually thought to be the center of the world for around 400 years until Rome embraced Christianity and forbade prophesying at Delphos.
Okay. But Delphos, Kansas, was not actually named for Delphi, ancient Greece, however.
No, it was named for Delphos, Ohio.
Okay.
By its founders, who had come from Delphos, Ohio. And Delphos, Ohio was named after 4 small towns there that had merged to form one city. And we couldn't find any information on why that one was called Delphos. But we think it's pretty clear that by the time Delphos, Kansas was named, well, it's probably irrelevant.
Okay. And, it was, yes.
Tangent warning.
So we're ruling out a UFO coming to Earth to visit the Oracle at Delphi and having typed the wrong thing into Waze, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. They should have made a left turn at Albuquerque.
Okay. No,
no, we're totally making jokes about this story right now, which actually, it brings up a fascinating point about UFO stories. And before we drill down on it, I just want to be absolutely clear that regardless of the veracity of this story, we're not in any way making fun of Ronnie Johnson or his family or what they purportedly witnessed.
Absolutely, because without these stories, we'd have nothing to talk about. And we do love talking about this stuff. A few weeks ago, we told you about the Great Courses Plus, an amazing place online where you can go to learn about all the things you either forgot or never got a chance to check out when you were in school.
That's right. With thousands of lectures from hundreds of courses available, you can learn about anything that interests you, and we want to give you a chance to try it out for free.
When they first came to us, they asked us to check out one of their more popular courses called Turning Points of Modern History, taught by Professor Vehas Lulavachus. It's a fascinating look at key figures, events, and discoveries that have impacted and shaped history.
I love these lectures. I actually really dug the one on the Opium War in China, which I think is number 12 in the series. It was just too cool not to watch. I learned that Samuel Taylor Coleridge wrote what Professor Lulavachus calls one of the most famous drug-induced works of art in history, the poem Kubla Khan.
Yes, Coleridge, one of my favorites, really. You've heard of Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner?
Yeah.
The albatross around your neck?
Oh, yeah, that's
he
him.
did all that. I don't know if he was on drugs. I don't know if he had been smoking opium.
Yeah.
Who knows? Probably. But that's the great thing about this. You get to find out for real, not from a couple of bumbling idiots like ourselves. It's a treasure trove of information. With the Great Courses Plus, you can watch as many different lectures as you want, anytime, anywhere.
And now, the Great Courses Plus is offering our listeners a chance to stream hundreds of their courses, including Turning Points in Modern History, a $215 value for free when you go to thegreatcoursesplus.com/legends.
Start watching today. That's thegreatcoursesplus.com/legends.
So the problem with even the word UFO is that it has a stigmatized connotation now that has been specifically engineered to make any discussion of the topic make you seem like you're out of your gourd.
Right. Well, okay, remember this thing, because actually this comes up in contemporary UFO discussion. Think about what it stands for. Unidentified flying object. It's just unidentified. It doesn't mean there's little green men or whatever, or there's some kind of woo-woo wacko thing about it. It's just that you saw something that did not look like any other plane or helicopter, any other flying object that most people have ever seen.
You couldn't identify it.
Exactly. That's all that means. So, yeah, it doesn't mean you're crazy. It's just something strange. Now, the military has a lot of strange things that most civilians have not seen.
Yeah.
But that's why when a pilot sees something, especially a military pilot sees something, that's taken with a little more credibility because they've seen a lot of strange craft, especially if it's experimental. And if they haven't seen it and can't tell you what that is and doesn't behave in that way, then you should take notice.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, actually, because one of the books that we researched for tonight's show is called The Compelling Scientific Evidence for UFOs. It's by Dr. Errol A. Farouk, and it's available on Kindle, by the way, and it's a very interesting read, although it's not without its critics. But Dr. Farouk points out that the U.S. Air Force had a lot to do with creating the stigma around UFO reports on purpose. And so the question you ask is to what end? Is it to protect military secrets?
Well, I'll tell you exactly to what end, Scott.
I knew you would know this.
To make people think you're a wacko. That's it.
But why? What's the goal?
Because it takes attention away from it. If people say, hey, there was this glowing thing, especially if it caused damage and now my hands and feet are numb, I want somebody to sue. And if you sound like you're just crazy, well, there's nobody to sue. I think I maybe have mentioned this case before, but it's fairly recent, within the last maybe 3 or 4 years. This poor woman, her husband dying of a bad cancer, and he worked at Area 51 every day. Well, you can't sue us for that, for putting you in harm's way, because it doesn't exist.
Right.
And I think the final ruling was that it's more important for national security than for you to sue over your husband's death, that this place does not exist.
You know what, though? Just take care of her.
Well, that's what they should do. But
I mean, why does it even have to get that far?
Because even doing, I think the line is that even doing that would be admission that there is weird things.
What? And what?
Out there.
Putin's going to kidnap her and waterboard her? I don't understand.
But the reason why is because they're so secretive there that his job was to burn everything in a pit, and that included all office
this is
furniture.
That guy.
Yeah,
I remember that guy.
He was a custodian of sorts, and he just burned because nothing must leave that base. No papers, no office equipment. You don't know who scratched what into what while they're aboard.
Alien bodies,
alien bodies. Everything went into the pit, and he burned it probably with a very flammable liquid and just destroyed it all. But of course, being around all that smoke gave him some nasty stuff. So the reason for doing that is that you don't want people coming back to the Air Force or the Army saying like, hey, you crushed my shed and now I have leukemia. So I want some answers. What is that thing? So if you look kind of crazy, it's misdirection. And so that's the one big argument by UFO proponents and enthusiasts. It's really just misdirection from a long time ago. Now, the other vein that you mentioned earlier tonight was that there might be an easing into the acceptance of UFOs into the zeitgeist, the public consciousness.
And I have to confess, as a producer of our show,
sure.
I've had nervousness about doing a UFO show, which is why we're so far in before we got to one. And then also we did the Bigfoot show.
Yeah.
Bigfoot is the same thing. Well, you're crazy if you talk about Bigfoot.
No, but
and it's not fair because
right.
You don't have to be crazy to embrace the idea of something that's never been discovered before. It's not.
That's always happened throughout the human history. And look, then Alexander the Great was crazy because he also had a UFO encounter.
Yeah.
As they were approaching the Battle of Tyre. So merely seeing something that you cannot explain does not make you crazy. Now, you might debate what you saw, and I believe this is true. A lot of people see stuff that's actually a phenomenon that they don't know what it is exactly. So, of course, that's what they jump to. And maybe occasionally it really is the planet Venus, but I would say a lot of the time people see something that they know is not Venus, swamp gas, whatever you might say. I can't say what it is, but it is not of the ordinary realms. It doesn't make you crazy just to have witnessed something moving around in the woods that was very tall and hairy.
Doesn't make you any crazier than we are. We're sitting in a blanket for it and talking about
it. If you've listened to some crazy debunking explanations, they sound, I say this a lot, they sound crazier than people describing what happened at the time.
I agree.
Because you're trying to hammer that square peg into that round hole, and it ain't fitting. And now you sound crazy.
Yeah.
But I think most people just don't want to believe in this stuff. It's just too frightening. I personally believe that. So
we're about to get 50 emails for overusing the term crazy, by the way.
No.
Yeah.
Well, no offense to anybody, crazy or not, or whatever you've seen.
Including us.
However, this is something you cannot deny. And this is what people, debunkers and skeptics alike, and rationalists, show me some evidence. Show me some trace evidence.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah, what was left behind?
According to our research, there are 3,500 to 5,000 cataloged trace evidence cases. I'm not sure to what degree they're all worth looking at, but the Delphos ring is probably easily the most famous trace evidence case, I think. But they've happened all over the world, and I looked at this list of all these that we are referencing, and a lot of them are overseas, frankly. It's France. It's a hotbed,
really?
By the way.
Oh,
France is a hotbed. The aliens are going there and dumping their trash.
Well, who doesn't want
picnic tables?
Who doesn't want to vacation in France? Yeah.
In addition to the ring, which we'll get into more detail on in a minute, there was also a 3-inch diameter tree branch that was dangling down from a tree next to where Ronnie saw the ring. It had been broken about 8 feet off the ground. But it was still attached to the tree, and it had some strange characteristics. It was snapped as though a branch would snap when a tree is dead. But the thing is that this particular tree wasn't dead. The tree itself was green under the bark, and it still had leaves on it.
Yeah, that was reported by Thaddeus Smith, the local Delphos Republican newspaper reporter.
Yes, she was the reporter that wound up doing the story.
Yeah, she brought some of her, I think, family members. They went down there.
She brought her husband at the time, and I think it was her stepson or cousin or something like that. They were all curious about it.
Sure.
That
was her description. So now we're getting into interesting facts, because it's not just, you can take any one of these things and maybe biologically take it apart saying, well, it was this, it was fungus, it was this, it was a dead tree, bark beetles, whatever. In combination, it starts to get more interesting because, yes, that description that it was green under the bark, but it cracked and broke like it was really dry, dead wood.
Yes.
And it had green leaves on the end of it, too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the other thing about it is at the base, it was blistered and had a whitish ash around it, which is the other super weird thing about it. And so it's a little bit unexplainable. I guess you could jump up and try to pull it down. Maybe it would have snapped that way. But, I mean, you're not going to jump up 8 feet. But
unless you're in the Dyatlov Pass.
Yeah. Trying to get away from a Russian Yeti. Anyway, the ring was glowing. That's what everyone says. And the reason I mentioned that it was important that Irma Johnson, Mrs. Johnson, pointed out that she did not use a flash was because when the investigators came out, the one most famously associated with the case is actually Ted Phillips, who we're going to talk about here in a little bit. And he's not the only guy. A guy came out, I believe, from the Air Force. I can't remember, but he immediately debunked the photo and said, oh, it's very clearly, talk about swamp gas.
Yeah.
It's very clearly the glow is from a camera flash.
Yeah.
She said that she didn't use a camera flash on the Polaroid. I honestly can't remember if you had a choice. You could. Did it plug into the top, or could you turn it on and off?
It depends on the model. They started off with a flash bar. And for you youngsters, that was a bar that had, I think, 5, maybe 6 flash bulbs in it.
Yeah, and they blew up. They worked once.
One at a time. And I think maybe you could flip it around. Some cameras had the flash cube, remember, in the camera, as you advance the film, it would flip it around. So there's four flash shots on it, and then you just...
My question is, can you turn the flash off on a Polaroid?
Well, you don't stick the bar in. Yeah.
So she brought it out. She took that picture,
right?
Which I believe was the last one they had as well, if I remember.
Oh, the last photo?
It's always that way, isn't it? Kind of like the Yeti shot at Dyatlov.
Right.
But... which actually wasn't the last shot. It was second to last, wasn't it?
I think so. Well,
but it was second to last on one camera. They had like 5 cameras.
But anyway, the other one had the exploding orbs.
We shouldn't go down that.
Orbs.
Yes,
okay.
So she said she took it without a flash. The ring was glowing. The Air Force guy said, "Oh no, it's definitely it's not glowing. It's just reflecting the camera flash."
Right.
So there's that whole debate, which is another part of what we're going to talk about in part 2. But right now we're going to talk about Ted Phillips. He was the first investigator on the scene, and he's the one who wrote the report in the Flying Saucer Review. Speaking of stigmatized, the Flying Saucer, even more stigmatized than UFO. The Flying Saucer Review, it's even for me, with the whole argument I just made about stigmatization, it's hard for me to even say that with straight
Plus,
face.
this was a flying mushroom.
Yes. Yeah, it was a flying mushroom. Yeah, I don't guess they had
the cap part, not the stem.
So it was in the wrong magazine. It should have been in the Flying Mushroom Review.
No, but when you were when you were growing up, it was saucers, and I think that comes from 47 again.
Saucers are still being cited to this day.
There's all manner of shapes.
Yeah.
But the most popular ones now are the black triangles. That's the latest version.
They're popular, but the saucers are still out there.
No, saucers are still out there, but I believe, now I might be misspeaking here, but that was a misappropriation of a shape name from Kenneth Arnold's 1947 sighting around Mount Rainier. They were actually kind of crescent shaped, but the newspapers, I believe, said they kind of just said saucers, and then that's what stuck. However,
this is why Forrest is my co-host. I don't know these things.
However, if you're in Alexander the Great's military column marching, and when was that? 329 BC, something like that. You describe them as gleaming silver shields coming down to buzz your troops. Yeah. So there you go. You go with what's saucers. We don't, most people have teacups and saucers. Yeah, so that description, though, is seminal, I think you could say.
Yeah.
And for that journal, for that review, again, one of the first cases where people are actually looking at something left behind.
Right, exactly. So getting to Ted Phillips, he was the first investigator on the scene, and he is the one who wrote that report, as I said, in the Flying Saucer Review. Now, Ted is an extremely competent investigator and is pretty much the go-to guy on this case, and he was also a friend of J. Allen Hynek.
Ah, Dr. Hynek.
One of your favorites.
Well, he's because I love that he changed his tune. Because, again, we mentioned him, Lake Baikal.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
It might be just swamp gas, which, again, that the papers pick up, and it's stuck.
Yes, he was the guy that said that, right?
Yeah, well, he was asked, I believe, to make a comment just off the top, off the cuff, off the top of his head. And he just said, I don't know, maybe it's, well, look at the region. There's swamps around there, right? Maybe it's swamp gas. I don't know how cavalier he was, but he later regretted that.
Yes, he did.
And then he got into, and this is not a hack. I think one of our Astonishing Research Corps team members who knows about this stuff, I just remember that flashing. I couldn't get too deep into it at the time, but it was like, is this guy some kind of hack? It's like, no. This guy's a physicist of the highest order and worked for the government for a long time, but also came up with the title to a great film, which we've mentioned before.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Hynek actually came up with a whole classification system for the types of encounters that you might have with a UFO.
Yes.
And I can't remember if we went through this list in the Lake Baikal episode. We might have.
But not the whole thing, because now, yes, there's subdivisions now. But basically, of all the stories he started hearing, he said, well, scientifically, again, this guy's a scientist. We have to classify this somehow.
Exactly.
Because the types of encounters we're seeing, Spielberg, he had him as a consultant on Close Encounters.
Yeah. And he had a cameo at the end.
Yes.
When they
Bearded
step
guy
off the
with
ship.
a pipe.
Yes, he had a pipe if you decide to watch it again. So his system starts here. It starts with the NL, that stands for nocturnal lights. The next one is ND, nocturnal discs. Then there's DD, daylight discs or objects. RV, radar, visual cases. And by the way, while we're on that, I just want to quickly point out that Ted Phillips did contact a local radar installation and asked them if they had a signature for the craft that Ronnie Johnson saw, and that night their equipment was off.
Oh, really?
So, yes.
Just happened to be off.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, well, I mean, they probably, who knows, somebody's
Yeah.
trying to save on the power bill.
Yeah, cleaning the screens.
So after the radar visual cases, there's the CE1 that's a close encounter of the first kind, which is just generally a sighting.
Yeah, that's what
However,
I thought.
the ones,
I thought.
yeah, but the ones before it are sightings as well. So I'm not
Well,
sure.
not
they're
nocturnal.
full.
Not you're saying types of sightings. So,
Yeah, maybe a daylight sight, but there's already daylight discs.
Yeah, I think now when you're actually talking about a pretty established sighting, maybe multiple witnesses, something confirmed by several people, and maybe even photographic evidence.
Yes, and then after that we have the CE2, the close encounter of the second kind, which is what we're talking about tonight.
Right.
Trace evidence case,
Yeah,
or
something
evidence left behind.
Exactly. Other than just a photo, which is just a photo, and of course nowadays is probably photoshopped. But now we're talking about physical evidence left behind that is not explainable by earthly means.
Exactly.
Close encounters of the third kind.
And then there's CE3, the close encounter of the third kind, which is...
You're Richard Dreyfuss, and you're wearing a red tracksuit, and you go aboard a giant mothership.
Yes.
Well,
I guess willingly.
Well, he
it's
did.
Contact.
Yeah. No, it's
different from the fourth kind, which Jacques Vallée added to the list after, he augmented Hynek's list.
Yes, that's right. There's subcategories.
Yes. Yeah. Well, there's close encounter of the fourth kind, which is an abduction case. So that's what I'm saying. That's when Richard Dreyfuss gets taken in the middle of the night and probed
and he wasn't. Yes, no, he disagreed upon at the onset.
Yeah.
Yes,
please. Where's your Richard Dreyfuss? Because now is the time to do it. Richard Dreyfuss being probed. Impressive.
Boy, you didn't. I can't work like this. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a short notice.
Folks, that was worth the price of admission. That was worth the price. And then there's close encounters of the fifth kind, where there's actual communication between a person and an alien.
Yeah.
And which can be psychic, apparently.
Yeah, that's a very valid point, because that happens quite a bit. I just previewed a book, or put it on my wish list for Amazon, from Ingo Swann. And that's kind of the title, is the penetration by...
Why are you using the word penetrate? I don't want to be
That's the name of the book.
Penetrated.
I know, that was... Well, got your attention, didn't it? Yeah, so that's to check out his book.
You'll feel a slight pinch.
Well, he's kind of a major figure in the field of remote viewing.
Right.
And you could say psychic
don't mention
connections.
Remote viewing again.
Well, people have been asking.
Yes, they have.
And we are going to do it. It's going to be a while. It's going to be a while, because I have to become a master in it. So it's like give me 2 months, I'll get my black belt. No, it doesn't work like that, but that's a whole other story, seriously.
Yeah.
And that involves Dr. Alexander Cannon.
So Ted Phillips went to investigate this case, and he went quickly because he believed in getting to witnesses before they could be corrupted by retelling the story or leading questions from journalists. And he also wanted to acquire the trace evidence that was there before it could be contaminated or it changed states too much. And he actually wound up collecting over 35 pounds of soil from the area for testing. And he noted that on the surface, the soil was dried and crusted. It appeared to be hydrophobic or water repellent, which is all the rage these days. Now everybody's coming out with these sprays for your iPhone, and the water just beads up.
Yeah, no, they have them now. It's there's a paint. And basically when you see the demonstration, you can actually... and it's interesting because you can take a metal sheet, paint a square on it, and it will all the water will gather up around it, or conversely, be contained in a square and will not move outside. It's pretty freaky looking. It looks like a square pillow of water.
Reverse engineered.
But yeah. Well, there you go.
No, it's not really. It's just simple science, but it's pretty cool.
But it's important because it's not totally freaky. This does happen.
It does.
You can engineer this to happen. Not then.
Back then, not so much.
Not so much.
There are natural occurring hydrophobic things, though, which again we'll talk about in part 2. But...
So I wanted to point this out. So Philip reports on this, but this was also seen by the family. They noticed, I believe, a couple of days later, there was a rain. The ground
was
inside
muddy.
inside the circle and immediately outside, but the ring was dry. The ring part itself was dry. And what's interesting is I believe sometime later, maybe a couple of weeks later, it snowed.
Yes.
And the snow stuck to the ring part.
And didn't melt.
But was melted in the center and around outside of the ring. So
it was melted everywhere else.
There you go. Pretty interesting.
Yeah. The top was white. It was crystallized. And the ring, by the way, just so you guys know, was about a foot thick. And it was 8 feet in diameter, matching the size of the craft that Ronnie said he saw. So even after 32 days, it was still visible. And we have noted in our research that there was no growth within it for at least 42 months after it appeared.
Yeah, no grass, nothing.
And another thing that Ronnie had said was that when you took a transistor radio inside of it, it failed to work. Now, I love this fact. I wish that Ted Phillips had tried that or someone, because it's not corroborated. It's just something that Ronnie said. I wish they had tried to walk in there with a radio, because they did test it for radiation. There was no radiation present.
That's interesting. So they took a Geiger counter.
Yes.
No readings other than natural background radiation.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, and the other thing about it, when we talked about the hydrophobic properties, it was that the ground was actually dry down to 14 inches of depth.
Yeah.
Even though it was muddy all around, and as you mentioned, the snow. Another thing that Phillips noted, and this is that the tree, there was a tree that was knocked down, and I don't think we mentioned that earlier in the episode, but one of the things that had happened was that there was a dead tree that was 7 inches in diameter and had been knocked down. And Phillips had speculated the possibility with the sheriff. He and the sheriff, I think, were examining things by themselves, and Phillips was like, well, do you think this is a hoax? Do you think they maybe pulled this down with a tractor? And the sheriff said, no, and that's going to come up later. The sheriff actually gives a character testimony about the family. But there was no obvious signs of how it came down, and according to the Johnson family, it was standing prior to the event. And in the way that it came down, Phillips concluded that the action of it coming down was associated with the craft landing or approaching the area as opposed to departing, because it did not hit the tree when it departed. Ronnie did not say that it had. He just noted that after the incident, the tree was down. And here's the thing about the tree. He said, yeah, it was dead, but it was a pretty healthy tree in terms of size.
Yeah.
Those are not easy to come down. And I will tell you that I personally know this because I had a friend, I used to have this Jeep, and I had a friend here in LA who had these 3 or 4 trees in his yard about this size. And he was like, hey, can you come over and we'll pull these out? Because he was re-landscaping his house and he likes to do everything himself and didn't want to pay anybody if he didn't have to. And I was like, yeah, it'll be fun. Raw, my truck, you know. And I went over there with the Jeep and we wrapped a cable around it. Not a cable, because I'm smarter than that. It was a tow strap.
Yeah.
With one of those non-kinetic ones that doesn't expand. And I tried to back up and pull this little tree about this size out of the ground, and it is hard.
Yeah.
Like the truck, I had to get into 4 low and back up. And
you didn't
want to come out of the ground.
Right, you didn't use the winch.
Well, I started with the winch, but the winch just pulled the Jeep to the tree.
Oh, that's funny.
Which is how...
Yeah, and there's a giant, 4 giant skid marks now.
Yeah, exactly.
So
anyway, my point is it's not an easy thing to do, even with an old dead tree, unless it's like completely hollowed out and, on the verge of death, which apparently this one wasn't. So that's just something to note about it. And I'm not trying to present confirmation bias because I don't know what to think about that tree, but they all say that it wasn't down before this and it was down after that. The other thing that Phillips noted was that he didn't think the craft could have had a vertical ascent to where it landed because there were branches over the area where it was seen. Mm-hmm. And it couldn't have gone in or out of there without damaging those branches, unless it was, moving from dimension to dimension, not following the traditional rules of physics and science. So there's that. And we published a link to Phillips' report, which has a lot more information in it, but I want to talk about the elephant in the room, which is, was this whole story a hoax? Is it possible that they made it up? I mean, of course, it's always possible that things have been made up. But there's a lot of factors that you have to take into account when you're evaluating the idea of that. And some folks on the internet have published uncorroborated stories suggesting that there had been a chicken coop where the ring was, and the ring was a result of droppings mixed with oxidized chicken wire coming down on the ground for years and years and years. The thing is, Mr. Johnson stated that the family had been there for 14 years and there was never a structure where the ring was. So again, like Forrest says, these guys are doing a lot of work for this hoax if it is in fact a hoax, deflecting all these different suppositions and and by the way, there is we couldn't find, and we dug deep and the ARC went deep. We found all kinds of newspaper articles, all kinds of information. We did not find any other case anywhere that corroborated this one paragraph on one webpage where somebody says a neighbor said there was a chicken coop.
Yeah, right.
So that line in itself is actually less believable than the story of the UFO. Which was another thing, a point that you made earlier about the whole debunking thing is really coming out of left field here. You need witnesses on both sides.
Well, that's one thing, Professor Abbott says, which is kind of, I took to heart, because we asked him about some kind of outlandish left turns in the TSM story,
the Somerton
Man story. Yeah, and he's saying like, well, it's very interesting, it's very dramatic, but I can't find any kind of concrete evidence or proof of this origin, so I have to leave it as that, other than just being an interesting story. I can't give it any credence. Not because he's found any evidence to the contrary, just I can't find anything about it at all, so I have to leave it as it is. When you mention a hoax, I am a big proponent of, there's an old saying, it's called consider the source. And when it's a hoax, I look to the people hoaxing it, because that's a certain type of person.
Yeah.
I've come to find out. If it's either a Bigfoot carcass in several glued together coolers with a bunch of cow guts splayed all over, which at the first, like, the guts, what do they run over it with their car? Like, they're just adding things that don't make sense. Well, there are a couple of characters. Some folks are more nefarious. They're out for money and fame. I think maybe like with Ostman, I don't think it's totally, it could not be totally a hoax. Maybe he did see something strange, a strange creature moving around in the woods.
Forrest is making a reference to episode 25.
Oh, very good. God, you know the number of that one.
Oh,
yeah.
I thought it might come up. That's the only reason I remembered.
Right.
Which is the Albert Ostman story. Albert Ostman was kidnapped by a Bigfoot.
Kidnapped by Bigfoot.
And that is one of the more fun shows we've done, frankly.
Yeah.
If you haven't heard it, check it out.
Ostman, he may be just an old timer, as they say, spinning tall tales, but possibly based in a kernel of truth. But he never got any money for it.
No.
He just liked telling the story.
He wasn't even really famous for it either. I mean, he's more famous now.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, but a lot of people didn't even know it.
Few people interviewed him, but
exactly.
It wasn't like he went on a world tour.
No, it wasn't a big thing. He just kind of, and again, who knows? Maybe it was just for his own personal, yucks and entertainment.
Yes, we digress.
Now, you look at a Balloon Boy. That guy's a little, let's say, colorful and wacky.
Yeah.
Okay, the dad, and he was on a reality show, so obviously he enjoys publicity.
Yes.
So anyway, getting back to these folks, they don't strike me anything at all like that. Just regular, good, hardworking Midwestern folks on a farm.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because and not to get anyone excited, because we do not have an interview for this episode.
Almost.
We got real close to getting an interview with Ronnie Johnson, who's still alive. He's in his 60s. And I actually called him last week, and I spoke to him on the phone. And he was very cordial, but he also was clearly, I think he's sick and tired of telling the story.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
And he wasn't, I said, hey, I want to call you back in a couple of days. He gave me a time, and I called him back, and he didn't answer. Now, I think he could have just been at the grocery store, but
I think he's just totally indifferent.
He is, and he's tired of it, and he's not trying to be famous, and he's clearly right now anyway, and he's not trying to make money. And I told him we had this show, and we're not the biggest show in the world, but hey, we're closing in on 3 million downloads. If he wanted the story to still be getting out there, it would have been an easy way for him to participate.
Right.
But he said to me, well, I don't know, maybe between 7 and 8. And he goes, I'm working a farm here. So,
yeah, that's the other thing.
This guy he
has more important things to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just didn't get a sense. And I want to come back around here to, I didn't get a sense that he was, Mr. Big Faker. Now, by the same token, he's an older man now. Yeah. And it's a long time between 16 and 60 something.
Sure.
But there are some other things that the Johnsons reported, and this is the parents, this is the whole family again. They reported that the sheep were jumping out of the pen every night for weeks after this. Snowball, who I guess stayed outside most of the time, was so violently trying to get in the house that they had to replace their back door with a steel door because he kept tearing it up.
Yeah.
So he was freaked out. Sure. Poor Snowball. I know we made fun of you on Twitter. I'm sorry.
No, you did. Don't leave me out of it.
Yes, I did.
All right.
But it was funny. But anyway, and then on top of that, Ronnie had physical ailments. His eyes were sore. They were hurting. He had headaches. He had nightmares. And he had a lot of issues for several weeks. So, and then combine that with the numbness in the fingers, with his mother and his father. You've got a whole lot of details that are coming together. And here's another thing that I wanted to say was that the sheriff who was part of the investigation actually made a statement about the Johnson family to Phillips. And it says the following: "To whom it may concern, in reference to the UFO sighting at the Durrell Johnson residence near Delphos on Kansas." And Durrell, by the way, is Ronnie's father, who's passed away some time ago. I think it might have been 96. Or earlier, but anyway. In reference to the UFO sighting at the Darrell Johnson residence near Delphos, Kansas on November 2nd, 1971, the Johnsons are lifetime residents of Ottawa County and the Delphos community. They are well known and well respected by officers from this department. It is the opinion of this officer that the information given by them would be accurate to the best of their knowledge. So that's a character reference right there. And for what little 10-minute conversation I had with Ronnie, I can't tell you a whole lot about what his character's like. I mean, he could be a bank robber for all I know. But
right.
what I'm not saying that's a joke.
No, he's a little look.
He sounded to me like a down to earth farmer.
Yeah, he's just stoic.
Stoic is the perfect word.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And you know what? He knows, and we knew. That's why we were. We would have loved to have present this for you, the listener. But I think I said this to Scott. I don't think that he's going to say anything different than he hasn't said already about the case that's out there that we're trying to present to you now. So it's not like, oh, and there's one thing I forgot.
Well, I didn't want to keep hassling him. I already felt bad about calling him at home.
The only thing that you would have heard is just what he sounds like.
I'm such a great journalist.
Faux
journalist. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's not even go there. So no, that's the thing is that it's no slight against him. If I were in his shoes, it'd be like, you know what? If I'm around, great, and I happen to be there, and I pick up the phone and it's you, fine. But I'm not coming in from the house.
Yeah,
I'm not calling you back. It's going to be at your whim because again, he has nothing to gain from this other than being bothered by someone by the likes of us for a good 40 minutes. Yeah.
I want to take a quick moment to thank everyone who went to Mack Weldon and placed an order using the promo code LEGENDS. We've gotten a lot of feedback from listeners who've been thrilled with the hoodies, underwear, socks, undershirts, and even sweatpants they got using our 20% discount.
Yeah, I've had my Mack Weldon stuff for a while now. Actually, the same pair when you heard me last talk about it. But no, I say it's my Walk the Earth undergarments. If I was going to be a Book of Eli Denzel, I had one or two pairs and an undershirt and one pair of socks. These are it. Well, as Mack Weldon themselves say, it really is truly better than whatever you're wearing right now.
Unless you're already wearing Mack Weldon.
Then it's going to be the same, right? Or nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
perhaps nothing. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go on record and say that Mack Weldon is definitely better than wearing nothing.
No, I will say it is definitely better than nothing. I mean, I guess some people are into that. Not me. I like having something there. And especially if it's antimicrobial silver underwear.
Oh, like a superhero.
Yeah, well, sort of. It's Pima cotton combined with what they call silver XT2. And let's just say it helps keep things fresh.
Okay. Let's do the call to action before you go any further, please.
Go to MackWeldon.com and get 20% off using the promo code LEGENDS.
And remember, if you aren't happy with your first pair of Mack Weldon underwear, you can keep it, and they'll still give you a refund. No questions asked.
Boy, that is mighty brave of them. But yes, that's MackWeldon.com, promo code LEGENDS.
We now join our story, not in progress.
It's kind of...
Because you would have missed some stuff.
That's right.
I want to come back now and talk about one of the things that takes away from the foundation of the idea of a hoax and adds to the foundation of the idea of something real.
Credibility?
Yeah, credibility. And that is the point that there are other witnesses.
Yes, there were.
Now, these witnesses were not at the farm. They were not on site. They didn't see anything close up, but they did see something. And this story on its own, it's so fantastic. It seems hard to believe, but the trace evidence, at least on the surface, both literally and figuratively, does make you think. So we've got Ronnie, who saw the actual ship up close, or so he says. And then we got his parents, who, by the time they came out of the house, saw it in the sky. So now we've got three people who all say they saw something, but those three people are a family. They could be in collusion on a hoax. But let's say that they all saw something. There were two other people who reported seeing something strange that very same night. I want to take this information straight from Ted Phillips' report on possible confirming witnesses. Elton Smith, and they actually list his address and phone number, which, as Forrest has pointed out to me off the air, is a method of...
No, they used to do that in the old days because it just proves like you're a real guy. You really live at this address.
Right.
Yeah, they didn't expect like you would today where some wacko's going to show up with a duffel bag full of duct tape and a bone saw.
Bone saw.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so, well, anyway, Smith, a credible guy, he actually was employed at the Delphos Attendance Center as a principal and educator. He stated the following about his observation, which took place at around 6:20 p.m. on November 2nd, 1971. I saw only a streak of light coming downward to the north of me in the approximate Delphos area, as I was walking to the north from the school building to the football field in Bennington, Kansas. I did not see an object, but just thought it was a falling star. As Smith observed the streak descending in the general direction of the alleged landing site just 40 minutes prior to the observation of the landed object, we might assume, and it would be pure conjecture, that Smith may have indeed seen the object on its landing path. If the streak was a meteor, it would have been quite bright, as the sky was not in total darkness. As no object was seen, however, we certainly cannot consider this to be a confirmation of the Delphos UFO. Now, and here's something I want to point out about this that was interesting to me. Today we have Google Earth. I'm sure back then they could make all these measurements and had maps and everything. But I went onto Google Earth and I looked at the school building, which I'm presuming in Bennington, Kansas, which is a very small town, is in the same place. And I'm thinking the football field is probably more or less in the same place relative to the building. The building seems like it might be newer on the satellite view, but it probably has the same footprint. The football field's not something you generally move unless you've got a problem with, toxic waste or something.
Fairy rings.
Fairy rings.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing about the football ring in Bennington is it is perfectly perpendicularly oriented to an axis with Delphos, which was however many miles away. I think it's something about, I can't remember. It's either 12 or 19 miles away, not too far.
And Kansas is pretty flat.
Yeah, so, but I guess what I'm saying is if you're standing on the 50-yard line and you were looking down the paint of the 50-yard line, you'd be looking straight at Delphos, which is where he was walking.
Right.
So when he specifies that he came out of the buildings, whether the old buildings or new buildings or whatever, and walked towards that football field, if it is indeed the same football field that you can see today on Google Earth, he was looking directly at Delphos, and he saw something right before Ronnie saw what he saw.
Yeah.
So it's just something to think about.
No, and again, he didn't see, he's too far away to see an actual object or craft, but he did see a big beaming shaft of light, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And he is not the only witness, though. We also have Lester Ernsbarger, who lived in Minneapolis, Kansas, not Minnesota, because that would have been really far away to see it.
Right.
But Ernsbarger was a Minneapolis Street Department employee and also a reserve police officer. He observed a bright light in the sky in the direction of Delphos at 7:30 p.m. Now we've got somebody who thinks they saw something kind of like a shooting star right before Ronnie saw what he saw.
Near touchdown.
Yeah.
Okay.
Roughly.
Right.
And then we've got somebody else who saw a bright light in the sky.
Departure.
Exactly. Right when the entire Johnson family says this thing that was as bright as an arc welder was departing.
Yeah.
I think those are pretty interesting events. Now,
it's kind of a personage and a locational triangulation.
It is.
You have the main incident at the focus, and then you have somebody. I don't know the distance. I didn't measure out the distances between where they saw it come and go, but three different people or three different groups and individuals at different locations and with the right timing.
Yeah. And that in itself, again, these would all just be sightings that were unprovable, except we're combining all this with this stuff that was left on the ground, which we haven't gone into a lot of depth on. We are going to do that in part 2, but
yes,
it's still very interesting. And the only thing I will say is that when you're in the middle of Kansas and you're in a very small town, the population of Delphos to this day, I believe, is around 400.
Wow. Okay.
It's very, very small.
Yeah, these are farming communities.
I will just say, because I've been there, because I've done a million road trips across the country. It's one of my favorite things in the world to do. And also I spent a great deal of time in North Carolina and have been to small towns and down to the beach where there's no light.
Yeah.
And you can see a shooting star any night of the week.
Right.
When you're out in that kind of area.
Well, you don't have a lot of light pollution.
Exactly.
There's not big cities throwing up light into the sky, so you can see
itself,
the Milky Way.
Yeah, exactly. And so that in itself is not super compelling, but combined with the timing, the statistical odds of seeing it at that exact moment. Also, by the way, it's still kind of early in the evening, and there's a full moon.
That's true.
A full moon.
Right.
Seeing a shooting star with a full moon in the sky, not as common.
Yeah.
So it's certainly not, maybe a meteor.
You're saying it's not the planet Venus.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just saying this is interesting. And for me personally, this definitely tips the scales in favor of something real happening in Delphos, Kansas.
Right. Definitely just something that is not naturally or commonly observed. I think we have a good substantiation for that at the very least.
Before we move on, I actually left out one other character reference for the Johnsons that I wanted to put in. I meant to say this earlier. This, again, is from Ted Phillips' report in the Flying Saucer Review. Yeah. This is quoting Thaddeus Smith, who was the journalist that first covered the story and the one that came out with her family to investigate the scene. After receiving information late in the afternoon of November 3rd, 1971, that personnel from the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office, Highway Patrol, and the Cloud County Weather Bureau had visited the site and taken samples of the soil and trees, I, with my husband, returned to the Johnson farm that evening to secure further information they might have for my newspaper article concerning the mysterious UFO. The Johnson family, my husband and I, without lights, walked in the darkness to the site. As we came into view of the area, we could see very distinctly the glowing ring. In the area around and inside the circle, there was nothing but darkness, giving a person an eerie feeling. The Johnson family, having lived in the Delphos community their entire life, are respected, truthful, conscientious, trustworthy, and a well-thought-of, typical, hard-working Kansas farm family. Signed, Thaddeus Smith, reporter, Delphos Republican. There's another testament to their character, and I think all of these character references add up to people that the locals trusted.
Yeah.
And
well, like you said, if anybody, listening out there is from a small town, will know, because in a small town, everybody knows your business and they know your family reputation.
Yeah.
And, if they're plain speaking folks, they're going to say, too, if you're full of crap. So,
watch, I don't know if you saw it, but you watch Making of a Murderer, that series that blew up last year, not last year, a few months ago on Netflix. If you want to see what can happen when a family has a bad reputation, deserved or not,
right?
You find out. But it's a good example of the microcosm of society that happens in those small towns, and which a lot of my family is from as well.
Sure.
So, there is one thing about this story,
I think I know what you're getting at.
We have to share before we end this one. The National Enquirer
right.
actually assembled what I think they called a blue ribbon panel of UFO experts.
Uh-huh.
And I think Hynek was even on this panel. I can't remember for sure. And also, Ted Phillips was associated with it.
I see.
However, they were going to offer a $50,000 reward for proof of a UFO. So they established these standards, and they asked people to start submitting things, and it wasn't too long before they realized that nobody was going to have any UFO proof that would work.
Right.
So they issued like a runner-up award of $5,000 for proof that a UFO had appeared, sort of a close encounter of the second kind.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. A second kind encounter.
Yes. As opposed to like putting a UFO on a truck and hauling it down to the Enquirer office.
I have one in a jar, or here's a small homunculus.
Yes,
I've saved.
And the thing about this is $5,000. It's a lot of money, and it's no mystery that farming was hard at the time, especially in the early 70s in Kansas.
Yeah. Well, there's two things about that. I want to say it's not that long ago. It's not. I mean, if you're a young person now, it might seem like ancient history. But if you're between, I would say, 30 and 50, like especially if you're 40 to 50, you grew up during that time. You can remember it, and it wasn't a backwards. There was technology. You know, people had been exposed to the wonders of the modern age by then. And so it's not like you were saying it was 1871. Okay.
Right.
So yes. But again, it was a while ago. And even the nature of the National Enquirer is, I remember it as a kid. My grandparents used to get a copy here and there, and you go over for Sunday dinner and you'd visit, and as a kid, I'd read that and the Time Life series of books that they had, which were awesome.
Yeah.
It wasn't as crazy as I think it kind of got to be in the late 90s and 2000s.
Yeah, it got crazy enough that the Men in Black, the movie, made fun of it as a great source of information.
Well, they broke the John Edwards case when nobody thought they were telling the truth.
Yeah, except that everyone I knew in North Carolina who was
knew about it.
Oh,
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah. I had an aunt who was like, "Oh no, that guy."
Yeah.
Way before the word came out.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. But what we're saying is that the reputation of the paper was even slightly, I would say, better than it is now. I think probably Weekly World News has taken, that's the Bat Boy one.
Yes.
I think that they've kind of taken
such a famous cover.
Yeah, they've taken the standard
right
bearer of really crazy kind of stuff. But anyway, what we're saying here is that I think they're trying to be kind of pseudo serious about this, or somewhat serious about this study, because I think if they found something like, well, yeah, here's a steering wheel from a UFO, and it's like, well, we don't know what this is. If it was something kind of tangible, it's huge paper sales.
Yeah.
So they're really interested in actually getting something, not being hoaxed themselves.
Right.
Okay.
Right. I think it's pretty clear that this could be a solid motive for generating a hoax.
Absolutely.
However, I think you'd have to be really, really clever to do it. And
why is that?
I mean, for a family of farmers in a small town in Kansas to come up with something that's going to convince astrophysicist and supremely well-educated, Professor Hynek,
right,
the father of ufology.
Well, one of the major dudes, certainly, yes.
Yeah, that's gonna convince him that they should win $5,000.
Right.
But people have tried stranger things. They had nothing to lose.
Well, exactly. And again, getting back to the character issue and the profiling of somebody who does kind of do a hoax, I don't think they really think it through a lot of times. It's exciting.
It is exciting.
The notoriety is exciting at the moment. That kind of whips you up into a frenzy. And you're not really thinking like, well, you know what? This video, the legs are really baggy and furry. They don't really, you don't put that much into it. That's why I say when it's seemingly well done, and who knows, what the outcome is, it's like the Patterson film. Again, I didn't really think about it much at the time. Kind of the similar era. Boy, if it was faked, it's very well done.
Yes.
Okay.
So we've definitely established a motive to create a hoax in the hopes of financial gain for this hardworking farm family that may have been having a hard time. I believe their primary crop was wheat. There was a lot of things that can happen in Kansas, especially in the 70s. I believe there were a few. There were serious storms. There were droughts. There were tornadoes. There were tornadoes actually just a couple of weeks ago,
right,
60 miles east of Delphos.
Yeah, like we said,
devastating,
big open area, so a lot can happen.
Yeah,
weather-wise at least. Yeah.
So you have to stop and think. Maybe it's a big conspiracy. Maybe the other eyewitnesses are friends of the family and feel bad for them. Everybody wants to help the farm out. And they're all participating in this hoax to try and win this $5,000 for them. There's just one problem.
Yeah.
There's a lot of websites online that talk about the Delphos ring case that will say that the National Enquirer contest raises a red flag with regard to a possible motive for creating a hoax. But what none of those websites did that we have done was dig down on it, drill down on the facts behind the Enquirer contest. And what we found out was that the contest was not announced until 6 months after this sighting happened. We'll be back in about a week with the second and last part of this story.
We'd like to thank our sponsors, Blue Apron, Mack Weldon, and the Great Courses Plus.
You can now find easy links to all of their offers at astonishinglegends.com/sponsors. Our show is edited by Sarah Voorhees, and the theme is by Judson Crane.
Sound design is by Ryan McCullough.
Special thanks to the ARC and its lead researcher, Tess Feifel.
But most importantly, we want to thank our listeners. You can find us online at astonishinglegends.com, as well as Facebook, Patreon, Twitter, Tumblr, Google+, and Instagram.
Copyright Scott Philbrook
and Forrest Burgess. Good night.